Uganda's economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services, digital transformation, and market access. Follow the conversation on the hashtag KnowYourBudget23.
A very good afternoon to you, right at the top of the hour. And of course, this is a very special day, the 15th of June 2023. Why is it special? It is the day for the budget reading. And of course, we all know that the national budget is one of the key instruments through which, government can implement its policy. And in just about a couple of hours, Finance Minister Matia Kashaija will be reading this year's 52.7 trillion budget. And we all know that in all its totality, this time around, it's a program-based budgeting approach. In studios, I'm joined by distinguished guests at the far end. First and foremost is Paul Lakoma. He's the research fellow. He calls himself the research fellow at EPRC, and of course EPRC, that is definitely the Economic Policy Research Center from Makerere. And next to me is the young gentleman, Robert Mbazira. He's the senior manager, Ernst & Young, and of course he's an expert in taxation. Thank you so much for joining the panel.
Yeah.
52.7 trillion. Before we talk about the previous budget, 48 trillion. There's always an increment, year on year on. Can you throw some light to that? What is it about? Why do we? Let me pose it to Paul first. Yeah, 52.7 trillion this time around. Last year we saw a figure of 48 trillion. Where does the increment come from?
Of course, we now face many development challenges. If we look at impacts of COVID, which needs public sector interventions to resolve some of the impacts of the pandemic on the economy, on schooling life, on businesses, small businesses. So the government needs to intervene, and that may explain the increase in quantum of the budget from 48 to now approximately 53 trillion. However, there has been a trend of increase in the quantum of the budget in the past 10 years. We are now at 35% of GDP, which is outside the recommended quantum, which should be around 25% of GDP. However, this year's budget, the key thing we notice is domestic borrowing has reduced by 5 trillion. That is good news for the private sector because it implies other factors kept constant, that credit will be cheaper for businesses in the coming year, since the public sector will not be competing for financing with the private sector. The government has limited the amount of domestic borrowing in the coming year. Another interesting aspect is fiscal deficit has also been kept at...
Limited domestic borrowing to which percentage?
Domestic borrowing?
Yeah. The government has limited.
It has reduced it by 5 trillion.
5 trillion.
Yeah, to 300 billion. It was 5.4 trillion before, but now it's 300 billion. That is very impressive because when the government is borrowing in large quantum, then the private sector faces competition, and the banking sector would prefer to lend to the public sector because of the notion that the public sector does not default. But now a lot of credit, as much, I can look at a bottom of 5 trillion extra liquidity in the market, left there for the private sector, for the small businesses. And that is very good because the small businesses is the heart of the economy.
Yes.
They produce 80% of jobs. They pay taxes and they create a lot of value for this economy. With a lot of credit there, we expect the expansion of the economy, and that could drive economic growth in the coming year. Another impressive aspect is fiscal deficit. This year has been kept to 3% of GDP, which is also very impressive. Cut it down by more than half. If at all it happens, that's what we have as a promise.
Estimates and anticipations.
Yeah, as a promise in the budget. But if it happens, it will be very good. If the promise is kept, 3% of GDP, that is the benchmark set for a developing country, to keep the primary balance at 3%. That's one impressive thing. The budget addresses the theme globally. However, I think some programs such as digitalization, have been given a rule deal. They are only getting less than a percentage. Manufacturing also, which is part of industrialization, is getting less than a percentage. In agro-industrialization, is getting 5% of the total budget. Yet these have been earmarked as the key programs to drive the economy going forward in the next financial year. However, I also recognize that money does not need to be necessarily allocated to a sector or a program which directly relates to a certain activity, because a lot of these activities are also integrated. Therefore, like if it's service delivery, a good infrastructure like a road is necessary for efficient and cheaper service delivery. So if a lot of money is put in the roads, it also contributes to agro-industrialization, delivery of goods into the market, monetization of the economy. I take that aspect, but I think we need to put more money in the areas we have identified in the theme, so that the theme addresses the challenges we have identified to be addressed in the coming year. I, however, recognize that some sectors, such as tourism, some sectors and programs such as tourism and digitalization have some capacity development issues in terms of absorbing resources. We need to work on these absorption capacity issues in the coming year, so that we really address the digital divide going forward. Thank you.
Apparently we understand that this cash is not at hand. We don't have this money at the moment. They're purely estimates. Speak to the fiscal 52.7 trillion budget this financial year.
Thank you, Patricia. First of all, when you look at the budget that the minister has yet to read out, you will realize that that budget would be funded by two aspects. One, there would be an aspect of domestic borrowing. Sorry, there would be an aspect of domestic revenue mobilization, but then also there would be borrowing. And this borrowing would either be external or it would be internal. But when you look at the 52 trillion budget that the minister has yet to read out, you will realize that close to 29-point-something trillion would be domestic revenue. That is by URA. And this is going to be paid by you and me.
Of course.
And Ernst & Young and any other company that you could talk of. But then also, that means that we have a deficit. Out of the 52 trillion, the other balance has got to be financed in one or the other. So that means that from onset, so we are starting with, yes, we shall start with a deficit budget from onset, which means that we have got to look out for ways of ensuring that ultimately we are able to survive as a nation, just like at your home. If you earn 100,000, but you're spending 300,000, you have got to look for the 200,000. So that basically means that government has got to go for external borrowing, and this has actually been happening even in the current year that we are yet to end. We have seen a number of supplementary budgets being passed, and that was because of pressure for spending, and ultimately we had to look for an option of ensuring that we are able to meet that
spending economy.
Yes.
Brilliantly spending economy. Thank you so much for giving that outlook. Of course, we can't delve in details about the upcoming reading, but let's look at economic growth. on the side of the previous budget. We know that GDP data showed we had improved from a previous 4.6% to a 3.5% in the previous budget. Do we see any improvement as we see the increment on the resource envelope from time to time? We want to understand, do we experience a bit of growth?
I think it is twofold. First of all, if I'm to put it into the normal context for an ordinary being like my grandmother seated in Chiwatle, you would say that when you look at GDP, you're basically looking at the value of the goods and services. And
if you're talking about the economic growth, that is where the growth starts.
Yes, exactly. What we must appreciate is that we are coming from a COVID era. So now we are starting to pick up
economic recovery.
Economic recovery, and you can see even from a revenue authority perspective, there were waivers for interest and liabilities. That shows you an effort that is being made by government in ensuring that it supports the businesses. But then also, I think, as we move away from the COVID era, businesses actually learned on how to do things differently. They were able to see how to survive. However, there is a very big challenge, as you might have seen. Government has come in to compete with the private sector when it comes to borrowing. Paul hinted on it, but you will realize that because of that, you end up crowding them out, and in a way you impact on the economic growth, which ordinarily you would have achieved. So it is always better for government, first of all, as you might see, in the budget that they are yet to read, there are amendments. And in one of the amendments that is coming through, they are repealing initial allowance. And that is an incentive which was basically encouraging manufacturers, investors to go and invest outside Kampala and the urban areas.
Okay. Paul, as an economist, do you think there's any way we can avoid borrowing? Is it possible?
Yeah, I'll pick up from where Mbazira has left, Mr. Mbazira has left. One is this year the budget is very impressive that 70% of the resource envelope is financed by taxes, or projected to be financed by taxes. The other 30% will be financed, about 9 trillion from the 30% will be financed by resources which have been made available by the accounting system to be used not that, but refinancing.
Okay.
Yeah, refinancing. That is debt which we had acquired, but then we pay off the interest, but then we are left with the principal and we can use it in the budget. We have up to close to 10 trillion of that money which we can use in the coming budget. Then about 6 trillion will be financed through external borrowing. And then, as I said, 300 billion only will be financed through domestic borrowing. So the issue of if they keep as it is promised in the paper, if the government keeps the promise as it is in the paper, then the issue of crowding out of the private sector will be kept at the very minimal in the coming financial year, because government, because there will be an extra 5 trillion Uganda shilling left out there in the banking system to be borrowed by the private sector. That would create a lot of opportunities, a lot of jobs, and it will create an environment for robust growth. However, this has to be supported by many other issues in the business environment, like electricity constant, water, cost of electricity has to be maintained or brought lower. What has to be constant? We have theft has to reduce, security has to be there. All those elements are key for the growth which we project in the next financial year, which would be projected at about 6 or 7%. When it comes to reforms in the capital taxation, which Mr. Mbazira is talking about, I think we the incentive system of Uganda is very generous. There's a call for reform going forward, not only in the next financial year, but
Incentive system for investment?
Yes, like the initial allowance is talking about depreciations, loss deductions, tax holidays. I think the system is too generous and the system is being abused. I think there's a call for a comprehensive review of the whole capital taxation or taxation of capital to address many issues in the system, including profit shifting and invoice trading and address some of those depreciation issues, interest, the cap, which would reflect the tight credit of a country such as Uganda. So going forward, I think there's need for government to look at the whole capital taxation regime. Not do piecemeal regimes and expect revenue to come out, because sometimes those piecemeal adjustments end up hurting the businesses, which would create more wealth, create more opportunities, and more tax, and then economic growth. I think there's a need for a complete review of the capital of the CIT system, of the capital of the corporate incentive system.
Okay,
Yeah.
so when you talk about impressive incentives that we have, of course, for the investments, are you answering the question of we can work with all these incentives at hand, traders, investors, if they're benefiting from all these incentives, then can we work around productivity within our own economy rather than, becoming more productive and having a boosted economy in order to not so much depend on borrowing?
Yes, but taxation of capital is a complex issue, not only for Uganda, even for very advanced.
I'll give a simple layman example.
Yeah.
For example, I have a cosmetics shop.
Yes.
And I am taxed 260,000 every year. If it comes down to 50,000, then probably something has been mitigated in my daily business process.
Yeah.
So if the taxes are exempted, because at the moment we're still recovering from COVID-19, we're not there yet. Don't you think that can, to some extent, make the economy a little bit harnessed?
Yes. As I was saying, taxation of capital or taxation of corporations or income is a complex issue.
Okay.
A lot of countries now are trying to shift the burden of taxation from corporations to individuals, so that a lot of this burden is taken over by the payee system or the personal income tax system.
Okay, and the import system as well. Yeah.
So that corporations are given relief because they create more value. They are the ones who develop technology. They are the ones who disseminate knowledge. They are the ones who create jobs. They do a lot of things in the system, which creates a lot of value. So we have to strike a balance between discouraging investments and also revenue loss. Address revenue loss. There's also a lot of revenue loss. Like Uganda, for the last 10 years, has not been able to tap more than 1.
To reach the target.
To reach the target of more than 1.5% of GDP from corporate income tax. It has been very difficult because of the very generous regime. So we need to strike a balance between revenue loss and also not affecting the efficiency of the economy, which drives away investors.
Patricia, if I can just add on what Paul has just put across. I think, in my point of view, government needed to have appreciated why, first of all, they had introduced initial allowance. And they were basically targeting those companies that had been set up 50 kilometers away from Kampala. That shows you that, in a way, it's as if they were trying to boost those areas to develop, to encourage people to develop outside Kampala, to establish outside Kampala. Now, if you do away with it, most likely you're going to have a scenario like what is happening. For example, I don't have the statistics, but you realize that when you look at our total economy, probably that's coming from the metropolitan Kampala over 60%. So now with initial allowance, we're basically encouraging people to go into those areas. And mind you, we have the highest population in rural areas. So by you establishing the factories there, people wouldn't be selling the land to come and brave borders in Kampala, but rather they would be productively utilized the other side, and in a way you'd be able to boost economic growth.
Yes,
okay.
I would also say I know that regime has been there, and I support the idea that they shouldn't have removed it because it was meant to create investments outside the city, but also that regime has been abused. There are companies which would pretend to have set up something outside Kampala, but yet they are operating within the city. Those cases are there. They are operating within the city. They are abusing the regime. They are benefiting from the regime, but they are abusing it. You go to check a factory set up, let's say in Kulu or Jinja, and you don't find it on the ground, or you only find a small office, a small operating office, but the real production is taking place in the city. So that regime has also been abused. Apart from that, the tax holiday regime also provides for people who invest up to $300,000 US in a country. They are allowed a 10-year tax holiday. So that's why I'm saying there are a lot of incentives in the system, which I think there's need for rationalization, because also there's a lot of revenue loss. Because now, if I invest 300,000 in rural area, I'm allowed not to pay taxes for the next 10 years. And this 300,000 is cumulative. It's not that I have to do it immediately. It's a cumulative sum. And once I clock that 300,000, then I start not paying income tax for my corporation for the next 10 years. That's a very generous regime. Though I accept that the initial allowance was catering for those who don't have capital to the tune of $300,000 US.
Okay.
Just catering for that group.
Well, thank you so much for now let's move a little bit away from initial allowance, because we want to understand how the economy has, grown in all its totality. One of the key sectors that has been given much attention is the agro-business, and of course we all know that the agro-business directly feeds into the industrialization. This time around, I think there's a 3.8 trillion towards this specific program. We want to understand, are we failing or are we moving forward in the agro-business? Because we all know, we hear people speak, it is the backbone of the Ugandan economy. If we have more production within, then we don't need to really import. If the export system is strengthened, then we have a strong economy. We always hear all this. And we know that the allocation toward the agro-business is always fair to some extent, though different opinions say different. But we want to understand, do we see the agro-business grow? Or are we still or at halt?
Yes. If I could take before, if I could go fast,
then
yes. Yeah. One is this budget has allocated 5% of the total budget to agro-industrialization, which is about the 3.8 trillion you're talking about. Well, comparatively speaking, with the other programs, that would look like small. But as I said, a lot of this budget is integrated, that agriculture will still need roads.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we would still need development program DPI, the DPI program, which is taking about 18 trillion. It will still need a lot of activities like business development, marketing, which are located in another program to develop. All those other programs, the agricultural system taps into the synergy provided by the other programs. Yeah, like I said, BDS services, banking, insurance, marketing of our products abroad. Those are located in another program, which is taking about 18 trillion. And that's why I said these programs have to work together in synergy so that they create value. However, there's a scope for improving the allocation made to agro-industrialization going forward. However, we also need to address issues of absorption. You don't want to put a lot of money if there's no capacity to use the money and with measurable outcomes. Yeah, not just use. It's possible for me to use money. If you give me 1 trillion shillings now, I will find ways of how to use it. Buy a plane, buy this and that and that. Yeah, yeah. It's not only spending. It's also spending with results, with development results. I think the thinking right now is that program may not be able to spend more resources beyond what it's being given right now with results, not just spending, but spending with results. So we have to address the capacity challenges in that sector to be able to absorb more money going forward, and that goes into improving productivity, intensifying production, using less acreage.
But have we seen that in 2022-2023 financial year? Have we seen an improvement in the agriculture sector? Are we seeing everyone engaging in farming, to make sure that there's the availability of food? I remember His Excellency saying that if we have enough food in this country, then we are safe. So are we seeing that happen?
I beg to differ. We don't need all of us to participate in agriculture. I think going forward in the coming years, only the efficient farmers should participate there. Farmers who can
you can farm in your compound. I have tomatoes. It's a simple, so that you don't have to go to the market to buy tomatoes. You don't have to go to the market to buy greens. Even with a small piece of land, I think everyone can try to cultivate. The Bible tells us that from the ancient times, people were farmers.
Yes.
We were all farmers. So my grandmother, my grandfather, they all lived on farming.
Patricia, I think we are making some strides.
Okay.
Though not as expected. Why? Just last week when the president was addressing the nation, he did say that over 60% of our exports were going to Africa.
From Africa to Africa?
Yes. To me already I think that is good. It could be why we are sending to Africa, maybe because for now we are not meeting the standard, but at least we are able to meet the African standard, not probably America and Europe. That said, you would also realize that when you look at the focus of the PDM, PDM is focusing more onto the 39%, which is not yet in the monetary economy. So with PDM coming into play, where circles are going to be able to get those funds, most likely
others have already begun getting the money. But again, it's also centered on agriculture. Are you a farmer? Do you rear some chicken? Are you doing pigs or something? This is where you don't go with your retail shop to get PDM.
Exactly.
You don't, even if it's Myoga. So the center is more on the agricultural sector.
Yes. And I think we are going to be able to make progress, though not from onset. Just like agriculture is, of course there would be those semi-annual where you're going to harvest, but it's unlikely that is going to probably be exported. But the good news is that, for example, you would be able to manage inflation locally. I don't know whether you remember, there was a time actually when you could buy a bunch of matoke close to 100,000. And right now, probably because people were able now to go back and get involved in a way there's been some bit of stability since there is supply. And I believe it's going to be twofold. For me, my concern would be on the percentage that agriculture is contributing to the tax basket. When you look at it, it's not even 1% of our total collections. You can imagine, out of the 25 trillion that URA is going to collect, there's less than 1%. Yet,
that comes from
majorly our total population is involved in agriculture. That means that you and me, who participate in agriculture, we are not giving back. And I think that should be the main focus.
Why aren't we giving back? Do you mean that we are cultivating for our stomachs? we are feeding our families, and we all probably, people are stealing taxes.
No. Although there are issues of integrity within tax administration, in regard to agriculture is sheltered from a policy perspective. A lot of agricultural activity is exempt from policy. Policy has exempted it for certain, because agriculture, this is my thinking, I think agriculture supports a certain constituency, which is important to the ruling class. So the tax policy generally has exempted it. Even when we try to introduce something like a 1% withholding, it's always removed. It doesn't last a year. We have done that several times. We have introduced a 6% withholding for agriculture. It was removed. We introduced 1%, I think, in 2018. It was removed. So agriculture as a group of people who are very powerful in terms of legislation, and they have managed to shelter themselves. Yet we have farmers, particularly in the livestock farmers. Some of them are billionaires, but they are not, as he says, they are not contributing to this country's growth. And going forward, we need to think about that.
You need to push that.
Yeah. Why
influence the policies?
Yeah. Why? No, policies we make them, but eventually it will be dropped.
Your idea may be picked.
We have done that several, and it has even been passed. But eventually it is revised, because as I told you, farmers are a very powerful constituency when it comes to legislation. But as he says,
they are above the law.
Not that they're above the law, but some laws are made in their favor. It's a give and take when it comes to policy. There are some losers, there are some winners. But agricultural participants tend to win most of the time when it comes to exemptions. Agriculture has largely remained exempted. I'm not saying tax the smallholder or someone who is farming tomatoes in his garden. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, there are some farmers, commercial farmers, who are making very good money, and they need to contribute to the development, just like you and me, who are earning a salary, or a teacher who is earning 400,000, and he or she pays 20% of their salary towards taxation. There's this farmer who is getting $1 billion, and doesn't pay a cent.
And besides, considering the fact that the agro-business feeds into industrialization and industry actually pays taxes, then there's a pinch there. How can we, away from the issue of agriculture being a little bit favored, how can we have better strides in agriculture translate into industrialization in a better way? I was speaking to a gentleman, I think he is the ED of Britannia, the ED of Britannia, and he was telling me, I really find it difficult to make my pulp here. I have to import pulp. Pulp, mango pulp. I have to import from abroad to be able to mix and make those beautiful, juices that you see in the supermarkets. And I was like, but we have mangoes in the north, we have mangoes everywhere, and these are some of the issues that we should actually look at when we look at agriculture. That how can agriculture smoothly translate into industrialization?
I think one, the farmers have got to know what the market needs. That is number one. You have just given a very good example that he actually wants mangoes. And to be sincere, you could even find that in your compound you have a mango tree. That means that probably what you have is not what the market desires. So one of the things that we have got to know, people have got to start appreciating the fact that agriculture can be done as a business. And the moment you are able to appreciate that, then you will know that you are able to contribute to the economic growth, and ultimately even your standard of living is going to change as a farmer. That is one. But then also, number two, government has got to come in. For example, this information should be made readily available to the farmers in the village. And then the other could be about provision of extension workers. Let those extension workers get to to the deepest village, so that in a way they are able to know what exactly the market demands, they're able to know the standards that are required. And with this industrialization coming into play, they would be able to provide what the industries are able to take on. And we shall see the multiplier effect coming into play.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree 100% that quality,
Value addition?
Quality, first of all, like he says, consistency. You can't be producing a small mango, big mango, green, yellow. There has to be consistency. If for industrialization, there has to be consistency in the kind of produce you make. Also consistency in supply. You can't be a supplier to Britannia, like you said, and then you run out of pulp in the middle of the year and you can't supply the pulp all through the year. So consistency in supply, consistency in quality, and it all goes back to also government assistance in terms of extension services, advising, disseminating technology. Some of these things need technology, better breeds, better breeds of mango, better ways of farming practices, and this knowledge. But
also a decrease on price. If you bought a mango on the streets, it goes for 1,000 to 2,000 shillings. Just one single mango. Now, you know, there is need for harnessing on these issues, because the woman selling the mangoes is holding a basket. But in my view, I would expect that this mango would go for 300 shillings or 500.
No, it's because that's a specialty market. The women who sell on the street while you're driving home and you buy the mango, 1,000, 2,000.
Even in the market?
Yeah, but that's a specialty market. It's not industrial scale. If we produce at industrial scale, those mangoes would go even for 100 or 50 shillings.
Yeah, but then you'll have to incur transport costs from the farm and then delivery.
When you're producing industrial scale, then because of economies of scale, the price goes down. Even transportation becomes cheaper because you're transporting a lot and they're going into a factory for value addition. But this woman is, you know, these mangoes, they have been handled with a lot of love. They are ripened from home. So
and then they peel for you.
Yeah, that price is justified because and then they are not dealing with very many people. They're dealing with a group of 10, 20 people. So that price, to me, I'm not surprised about it. But if we went industrial, those prices would go down. It's because we are operating in a very, in a way, that is not even a business. It's just subsistence in a way. Yeah. So, like Mr. Mbazira said, we have to start taking and conceptualizing agriculture as a business. Think about it as a business. Yeah, and that requires driving down the cost, because if one mango costs 1,000, what kind of business are you running? You're not going to compete with other mango producers in the region or globally. You need to drive down the prices. Yeah.
Okay, now becoming a middle income economy is a stride. It's not something easy. We see government really striving towards that with all these new initiatives, skilling Uganda, making sure that everyone touches money and be able to be productive in their homes and to the economy. Do we have any specific, avenues, any specific ideas on how to move people from poverty, because we see government really making a lot of strides, but nothing is really moving forward. We tell people to save, we tell people to invest, but I'm thinking, because if collectively we all come together and work together, we can better our economy. So how do you think we can translate that from poverty to at least middle income as Mosei wishes?
I think government has probably come up with very good programs. For example, you will realize that over time, I know I'm a little young, but over time probably there was Intandikwa, there was Bonabagagawale, then we moved to NADS, Operation Wealth Creation comes in, and currently we are at PDM. If someone looks at all those programs on paper, they're really good. Probably what we need to address are the issues that are affecting us. Before even we bring in other programs, let us do a very clear assessment on why those programs are failing.
A scorecard.
Yes.
Where's the performance?
Exactly.
How are these programs performing?
Exactly. Because through that, then you are able, before you bring in a new program, you are able to address the other issues. Just the other day when the president was carrying out those barazas, Northern Uganda, Masaka, he hinted on certain aspects in the PDM. First of all, corruption, but PDM is so young in its sense. It's less than a year. And we're actually saying we're going to use this to ensure that the 39% who are in the subsistence sector are able to get into the monetary space, and which is the theme for our budget still this year. Actually, it is the second year we are having the same theme. That actually shows you how passionate the president and probably the economists are with how they think if we really do this, we are able to get into that space. But then also, the other issue that needs to come into play, you know, moving into middle income status, someone has got to appreciate how do they arrive there. Here they just get the total income of the country and they divide by the total population. Okay? One of the things, if we want to ensure that as we move into the middle income status, you and me, you are able to feel it, that you have moved away from the
So maybe the very
countries.
first thing is mindset change.
Exactly. But then also number two, let us also try to ensure that we equally distribute this development. Because you can't say that you are in middle income status when in Karamoja you are struggling to have a roofed house. I don't know whether you get it. So one of the things that has got to be done, government has got to be deliberate in its efforts in ensuring that one, after we have achieved the monetary aspect, people getting into the monetary space, we do productive work. For example, you talked about agriculture. Paul talked about agriculture. Let us embrace it as a business. But then ultimately, we have got to feel it, you and me. You have got to really see it that you are now in the middle income status.
So the very first thing is mindset change. I also hear the issue of, there are a lot of complaints about the implementation process, that the government comes up with very good ideas, good policies, good initiatives, but then the implementation is corrupted. Can you speak to that, Paul?
Yeah. But before I handle that, just to supplement what he said, middle income is very simple, and I think if all goes well next year, I think, or in the next 2 years, Uganda will be a middle income country, a lower middle income country.
Justify that.
The growth, if we grow by 6 or 7%, I think we will be able to get the enough money. Like he said, it's just a calculation, just the GDP or GNI, or that is all nationals, all income of all nationals, then divided by the population. Which, if it comes to 1,030, then we are middle income, lower middle income.
But that is still theory. How do we translate that?
That's exactly what I want to go to, that now we need to work harder than that. There are so many middle income countries in Africa and the developing world who, even Uganda is doing much better than those countries in terms of welfare, in terms of distribution of income, in terms of social harmony. I don't want to name the countries. Some of them are just in the neighborhood. They are middle income, but life is better here because here there's more social harmony. Income is better distributed, and you will dispute, but I've lived in some of these countries. I know income is better distributed in Uganda. There's more. Uganda is a more egalitarian society compared to the other countries. So yes, we want to become middle income so that we join we join the other nations of the world in celebrating human advancement, but also let that middle income status be felt in the pockets of people. Let's redistribute this income much better. We may not determine the outcome, but we can equalize opportunities. We may not be able to equalize the outcome because people are different.
some of these opportunities to share? Because one would think the funds, the skilling, right?
Yes.
You're training. If you're training, the central alone, and you're not reaching out to the upcountry areas, then probably we're not handling things in equality.
Yes.
So probably when it is skilling, it should go across the whole country.
But he mentioned something very critical. Which I think I can re-emphasize at the risk of repeating what he said. He said, we have had so many programs, Entandekwa, Hakuna Mchezo,
Hakuna Matata,
PDM, there was one modernization of agriculture, PMA.
There's also the Mioga.
PMA, nuts and stuff like that. I think we need to have a conversation on why didn't these programs, what did these programs deliver? Let's first start with the positive. What did we achieve with these programs? Maybe we should maintain that. And why did these programs fail in the past? Or which areas what challenges did we face?
Maybe they had a phase and they were seasoned, and then something new had to come up.
When you come up with something new, like he said, you need to look back and evaluate so that you don't make the same mistakes. So if like a shilling was lost in the last program, you make sure in the next program, I'm not saying renewal or coming up with a new buzzword is a bad idea. I think we all need to refresh after some time. Something can get so old. I think I would be tired if we still had Entandekwa. I think I need a new slogan, to motivate me, to motivate as a country. You always need leaders who come up with new, fresh ideas.
But if you looked at all these ideas, they look alike. They're almost the same. Names just change. And I think people in positions in positions of implementing all these programs come up with these ideas. Like a young brain here, when he comes into play, he's like, okay, minister has told me to come up with an idea that is going to boost the economy. He will not rely on Ntandikwa. He would want to brand his name. He would want to come out as Mbazira, I think also that also falls into play.
I have no problem with the new names. As I said, the art of politics or the art of managing a country is also to always inspire a country. And some of these new names inspire people to do new things or do them in a new way. But I agree with what I want to re-emphasize is what he said, that we need to evaluate our past so that we don't make the same mistake going forward. So PDM, before PDM, maybe we should have looked at the program before PDM.
The Mioga.
Yeah, Mioga. And then see the challenges there.
I think there's a coexistence there.
So that
Mioga is still,
so that we don't make the same mistakes. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, but coming up with new programs, I have no problem with it. Because sometimes it's very inspiring.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, in just about 3 minutes, we have to wind up. Can I have your last remarks?
My last remarks are, government has come up with a very good budget. I must state that this year's budget target for URA, most likely they are going to hit it. Reason being, they have a deficit of around 4.1 trillion. And with this being their busy season, they are most likely going to hit it. They have a bigger challenge. And their next challenge is 29 trillion. Government has got to ensure that, first of all, it facilitates, which they already do. But then URA has got a challenge of training their staff that they have recruited to ensure that they are up to scale. But then also, as the government tries to hit this 29 trillion, it has to be mindful how the businesses have been left. That is very key. And in that case, let us ensure that we widen the tax base as opposed to deepening the tax base. And if we are going to be able to ensure that we are able to meet our budget, let us ensure that there is budget discipline. Otherwise, this aspect of coming up with supplementary budgets and spending pressures, automatically we shall be spending more than what we have. And that goes back to the businesses which would impact on our economic growth.
Thank you very much, Robert. And of course, when you say they widen the tax base, you're talking about include even other sectors into, instead of, increasing on taxation. Thank you very much. Oh, Paul, your last remarks.
Yeah, my parting shot is this is a very good budget, one of the best in the last 10 years on paper. I hope it's implemented. And like I said, 70% will be domestic revenue. Domestic borrowing has been curtailed significantly by 5 trillion. Deficits have been curtailed to 3% of GDP. With all this, we don't expect the private sector to be crowded out. There are some reforms at URA, even though URA has a higher target of 29 trillion. I think they can meet it, given the efficiency gains from the implementation of some of the reforms inside there, such as EFRIS, the electronic fiscal receipting system, the digital tax stamp. Some of those reforms are having a very big impact, and they could drive revenue growth in the coming year without even deepening the tax base, like he's saying. But also there's a scope for widening the tax base. The sheltered sectors, we need a conversation. I'm not saying we should do it immediately. We need a conversation where everybody contributes, including constituencies which have been sheltered in the past years. Also, we need to work on, we need to review the corporate income tax system and deal with inefficiencies in the system, in the design itself, but also integrity issues in tax administration. Yeah.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. And of course, we were joined by two amazing, distinguished gentlemen. At the far end was Paul Kuma. He's a research fellow from Economic Policy Research Center, Makerere. And of course, we had Robert from Ernst Young, that is Robert Mbazira, Senior Manager, and of course, tax expert. Thank you so much for giving your time to us. Yeah, we know that in just a couple of hours, there will be the reading of the budget. Finance Minister Matia Kashaija will be reading this year's financial year 52.7 trillion budget, and of course in all its totality it is program based. We know that some of the thrust issues on this budget will be enhancing security, good governance, rule of law, boost economic recovery. That is where we actually centered our topic today, and we all know that you and I and every Mwananchi would want to see every family, every household recover from COVID-19 financially and socially. Well, we will be coming back once again with another dialogue, but for now, stay tuned.
The budget speech reading for the financial year 2023-2024 will take place on the 15th of June 2023 at Kololo Independence Grounds under the theme Full Monetization of Uganda's Economy through Commercial Agriculture, Industrialization, Expanding and Broadening Services, Digital Transformation and Market Access. Follow the conversation on the hashtag KnowYourBudget23.
Jerry Con! Hey, Master Blaster! Touch him, man! Jerry Con with muscle! Those ones who say go for you only. Mundawa! First school fees I teach you. When I'm going to the Muscari, because of the camera is very far. Is you serious? Is serious you? What? Yeah? You stay put on it. Add kilometers to your legs. And you get your sugar. We buy milk from Umaru. And the woman refused to give you enough meat. Mama! Show him that they don't joke with you.
Okukakaluka n'okulungi kwetaagako omuntu akuyambako, n'olwekyo tujja kukuteerawo embeera esaanidde osobole okukola ekisinga. Awamu teri kitulema.
This isn't just a girl. She is the future. This is a teacher, a doctor, a community leader, our future president. She is the hope of our community. And as a community leader, I will talk to others about how we must protect her against child marriage and teenage pregnancy because it affects us all. We each have a role to play in empowering our teenage girls to protect them from pregnancy. Because when we empower them, we empower our nation. Protect the girl, save the nation.
Take action. Report any case of defilement or child marriage to the police or call Sauti 116.
Glow as you are with the new Spark 10 series smartphone from Airtel in partnership with Tecno. Own the timelines with picture-perfect selfies using the 32-megapixel selfie camera, 256GB storage, G88 gaming processor.
The Spark 10 smartphone comes with free 3GB from Airtel, so you can stay connected to a world of possibilities. Dial *100*5# to enjoy free data.
Airtel, a reason to imagine.
In partnership with Tecno. Stop at nothing.
Uganda is rich in natural resources and hard-working people. But to turn these resources into real progress and development, we need to invest in our infrastructure, education, and healthcare. That's where taxes come in. When we pay our taxes, we are investing in our country's future. We are supporting the schools that educate our children, the hospitals that care for our families, and the roads and bridges that connect our communities. And when businesses pay their taxes, they are contributing to the growth and development of Uganda's economy. They are helping to build a stronger, more prosperous nation for us all. So when you pay your taxes, you are investing in the future of Uganda and supporting the progress and development of our nation. Uganda is because of you.
Uganda Revenue Authority, developing Uganda together.
Ebiseera by'okuzaayo abaana mu masomero tebiteekwa kukaluubiriza n'akatono. Eno kusimba nnyiriri mpanvu kano kalipagano ka bidduka. Simanya kuzunga na banka siripsi. Kati osobola okusasula school fees z'omwana wo ate n'okola n'ebirala ntoko ku ssimu ye ey'omu ngalo. Ekikola kyangu nnyo. Nyiga bunyizi *185*8 ogoberera ebikulagiriddwa oba okozese app ya MTN Momo. Ate kati okola ki olwaleero? MTN Mobile Money Uganda Limited erungamizibwa banka enkulu eya Uganda.
The Magical Egypt Tour 2023 is here. A heavenly miracle waiting across the natural and divine attractions of Egypt, such as Cairo, Giza Pyramids, Saqqara, Memphis, and many more that will offer the gift of a lifetime. The chance to unlock all of the hidden powers of mind and soul, gain the enlightenment of the past and the future, and develop the power of healing. Departure will be Friday 16th up to 23rd June 2023. Basic package starting at $1,200, 8 days and 7 nights. To register, come to Gotove Tours and Travel at Nalkwego Complex Suta, UG's Extender, George Street, Nakasero, or call +256 758 530 059 or +256 784 568 392 or WhatsApp +256 782 556 078. Only few slots are left. Powered by UBC Television.
This is the University of Africa. On the streets, you get your real education. Here, everybody has a degree of something. But the most important qualification is imagination. His reason is to be the GOAT. The reason to imagine is to take the beat and make it lit. So no matter what your situation, just use your imagination.
Juko. Yo. Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Haven't you heard of the Parish Development Model PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a poultry project, and now things are moving.
Juko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. But what you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief, and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government, designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
There were societies, there were people that lived in what we now know as Uganda.
The clan became states.
We were united and given boundaries, but ideologically, nobody knew who was who.
It's been said that you'd like to put an end to the Kabaka-ship. Is that so?
I get to go to Parliament building and I find it's surrounded by soldiers. You had the announcement the government had been overthrown.
Amin comes in, he has no idea at all. So that's why we said, no. For Amin, we fight.
And then you would hear echoes from the whole rally.
I heard somebody called Yoweri Museveni who was training people in actually land, a place called Awere.
And so I thought, what is that?
Giver of life, Alpha without Omega. I am Africa.
Hail to Uganda, the Pearl of Africa, a land with the world's most beautiful, captivating features. Hills, mountains and valleys, the enigmatic animal species in the wild. A land where Africa is condensed into one small country with authentic endowment of nature and perfect safari. Uganda, the Pearl of Africa, is without the crowds with abundant premiums, wildlife and stunning scenery. Uganda, the Pearl of Africa, takes you beyond the guidebooks, the known features and gives you the insights unmatched. Keep it UBC TV, where we inspire Uganda with authentic beauty and nature of our motherland. Uganda, the Pearl of Africa. Discover the fountain.
The National Budget Speech Reading for the financial year 2023-2024 will take place on the 15th of June 2023 at Kololo Independence Grounds under the theme Full Monetization of Uganda's Economy through Commercial Agriculture, Industrialization, Expanding and Broadening Services, Digital Transformation and Market Access. Follow the conversation on the hashtag KnowYourBudget23.
A very good afternoon to you all. Thank you for watching UBC Television with me, Wadulo Mark Arnold. This is the Know Your Budget dialogue here. And in a few hours, I can say that the national budget is going to be read. A lot of people have the misconception that it's going to be passed, especially the public space. But the national budget was already passed by Parliament. So today, it's only going to be read. So it helps you to know what has been allocated where, which programs have gotten how much, what are the priorities the country is focusing on. And beyond that, it also helps you, know where best to play or position yourself within the economy to be able to take part in developing the economy, but also beyond that, helping yourself, you and your family grow, because national resources are national, as the word says. These are for everyone, and we entrust the government, especially the Ministry of Finance, to help us plan. So, ladies and gentlemen, allow me welcome in studio with me today Mr. Stephen Alor from CS Bug, an economist, and then Esther Mufumba, a program officer with the Uganda Debt Network. You're very welcome, lady and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, to start the pace, we are looking at a budget of 52.7 trillion shillings. This is up from the 48.1 trillion shillings of the current financial year. The next financial year has, beefed up, the budget has beefed up, and quite a number of things are coming to the light. I would like to start with the most sensitive priority that a lot of people are talking about, the fact that the country has to service its debts. Okay, we're looking at a really, really, really heavy debt servicing burden, and it's infringing on a lot of the money that we are going to be, resourcing. So I would begin with you, Stephen. What is your overview on the debt servicing status that we're standing at right now?
Thank you, Mark. It's good to be here, first of all. Well, our debt has increased. It's the current stock of debt. It's about 86 trillion, which is way too much. However, strategies have been put in place. For example, the domestic revenue mobilization strategy to try and increase the revenue. It's being put in place. We have the public finance management strategy and then the act. So whereas right now our debt burden is increasing a lot, but there are measures being put in place. So I think if these measures are adopted and adhered to, I think our debt burden can reduce.
Do you see signs and do you see potential for, public service to, manage or, take on these debts sustainably?
Well, the Public Finance Management Act, which is in place, outline guidelines that can be followed to try and effectively manage our resources. So also a lot of initiatives have been taken. I'm happy that the Office of the Auditor General is doing the head count for civil servants. So that's a good step in the right direction, because that means some of the money allocated for recurrent expenditure will therefore not spent in a wasteful way by giving it to the quote ghost civil servants.
Okay. Yeah. So let me then bring the same issue to you, Esther, from Uganda Debt Network. I think perhaps you can elaborate a little. What do you think is Uganda's position right now, and what way can we, move from this place to a much better place?
Good afternoon, viewers. Looking at our public debt, which is 86.6 trillion, and looking at the current budget, which is 52.7, you'll find that 27 trillion is going to go into debt servicing, which implies that as a country, we only have 25% that is going into distribution along the different service delivery programs, and that is quite small. So as a country, we will have to look at the interest payments that have rise to 6.1 trillion, And then at the same time, we have domestic areas, which are about 7 trillion. But in this financial year, the government only considered to pay 205 billion. So what does that imply? You find still domestic areas are still high, and no wonder we've seen some of institutions having suffered at the expense of domestic areas. Just the recent saga of National Water disconnecting hospitals due to accumulated water bills. So once water is disconnected from hospitals, what does it mean? It means children will go to hospitals, they can't access water, and even the patients, in the end, you're having diseases, infectious diseases increasing. That is as a result of increased domestic areas, which we have to finance at the same time. Then also we have the growing external debt payment, which is 2.6 trillion. And still it is part of that 27 trillion that Uganda has to finance, and there's no way out of it. Reason is we've already made commitments to this, and we have to pay back. And also we have the debt financing. You can call it rollover. How does it come about? For example, if you're supposed to pay a debt or pay back a lender maybe by, I would say, 20th of June, and you find yourself as a country, we are unable to pay back, you go and negotiate. In that negotiation, it means the terms are going to change, the interest rate is going to increase. And no wonder when we look at this financial year's budget, we have about 8.3 trillion that is going to go into debt refinancing. So as a country, how do we go past that?
And that's what I want us to, yes.
And most of the issues, like if we are acquiring loans, we should consider the capacity to manage these loans, because we've seen some projects where loans have been acquired, but they take time to take off. Case in point is the Mpigi road case, where you have to compensate those in the middle of the road. You have to compensate different beneficiaries, but it takes time. In the meantime, the administrative costs are going high, yet you have to pay back this loan. For example, if it has been projected for a period of 5 years or so, if 5 years elapse, you haven't made this payment, no, and you have to keep paying all the costs involved in that. So, as we are taking loans, we need to prepare adequately to manage the loans that we are taking. The other aspect we need to look at as a country to cut down on our loan, our debts, we need to look at the issue of corruption. Corruption is so much where you find the money is misused, and the unfortunate part of it, you find it is the big fish. Big fish are walking free, and then the small fish are arrested. So it is quite demoralizing for our country to engage citizens, to listen in the budget if they know, okay, this person took money, maybe a big political official took money. We've seen the recent scandal of the Mavati, and people are wondering, what has happened to the big fish? We only saw 2 ministers being arrested, and then most of them are free at the end of the day. So it affects what is the political will when it comes to fighting corruption. And then another issue as a country that we need to address the issue of widening our tax base. Currently, I think statistics between 3 to 4 million that people are directly paying taxes. And yet the target of URA, for example, they have committed themselves, the projection is 29 trillion in this financial year. How are we going to be able to get 29 trillion revenue so that we can ably finance our debt? So this means that you're looking at the corporate bodies, corporate companies that maybe are paying directly, looking at the deduction pay as you earn. Those are direct taxes. But how do we go into indirect taxes to make sure that, the taxman is able to collect more revenue through the indirect taxes? For example, on consumption of any good, the VAT 18%. How do we widen that? That means that for like a local person down there in my village in Jinja, maybe they would be interested to know, how do I increase my productivity to make sure I can access the market, sell my goods, And in that process, I'm contributing to the economy, and there the taxman is able to get his revenue out of that.
So in other words, you're saying that empowering the economy, productivity within the economy will definitely boost the revenue collection.
True, it will
Which
do
is
that.
which is a very good insight. I really love that. But then I'll also take it back to you, Stephen. Public investment. What is the potential for public investment, Uganda's public investment strategy, in helping us curb some of these bottlenecks that we're facing?
Well, almost the entire money that is allocated, for example, the 52.7 trillion, 80% of it is going into issues to do with the public expenditure in terms of contracts, development expenditure. So let's strengthen, for example, we've been advocating for e-procurement. I'm happy government has taken initiative for that. So let's shift away from paperwork kind of procurement and make sure that each shillings count. That's the slogan we want to use, each shilling counts. So in that way, we are looking at, if we strengthen procurement, because procurement actually utilize about 80% of our budget is spent through procurement activities. So if we strengthen the efficiency in terms of that area, let's go to e-procurement, the accounting officers being accountable. You don't have to commit government if you don't have money. Accounting officers don't commit government if we don't have money, so that then we don't have to borrow. One of the biggest problems we are having is also supplementary. If you look at this financial year that is ending this month, in maybe a week's time, in April 27, Parliament passed about 1.5 trillion in supplementary. So we are seeing, whereas the budget was about 48 trillion, it's going to go up to about 52 trillion, this budget, at the end of it. So if we are trying to look at reduce our debt burden, can't we reduce on our supplementary? Yes.
Do you think it's only the supplementary that is infringing?
It is not only the supplementary. However, it is one of them, and it needs to be reduced.
Because a portion of 1 trillion and 48 trillion might not necessarily be that big.
Well, it might not be big, but it's quite big. Because if you look at the principle of supplementary, it needs to be something unforeseen, something which is unavoidable. But you look at like the 1.5 trillion which was allocated, about 80% of it is going into recurrent expenditure. And these are paying bills and paying salaries. That's why we're saying accounting officers cannot be doing that. Because you know that you have this number of staff. If you projected to recruit them, you will again, you projected to recruit them maybe 5 people in this financial year, then it should be in your budget. So we don't want to see that. But also what my colleague said about revenue, domestic revenue mobilization by URA. I think that is one way we can reduce our debt, by increasing, systematically increasing our domestic revenue mobilization.
What do you think is challenging the revenue collection body from widening? Because I've heard a lot of especially from civil society, that we are not widening, we're just deepening. We're deepening the tax base, we're not widening it. So what do you think is really challenging them, or perhaps what ideas would you propose to them?
I like the new campaign launched by URA, the Empire Yange, the e-tax, e-receipt Yange. That's one initiative, though I have a problem with it. So because it is targeting people with smartphones, and we know from statistics, I think not more than 3 million people have smartphones in Uganda. So that is a good initiative, but will it work? So you ask me about widening the tax base. We need to bring the informal sector into the economy, but in a way that doesn't hurt the businesses. If you want to get tax from me, why not nurture me and make me be in a position to earn money, to earn profits? Then you can tax from that. So I think we need to be having such conversation. How do we bring the informal sector into the economy in terms of formalization? Because when the informal sector is formalized, business are registered, you know what they're earning, it's a easy way for them to to start paying taxes. Yes, and so it doesn't mean the URA should go for businesses and then tax them when they're not earning profits. But again, I know there's a lot of loopholes sometimes because of the staffing capacity of URA, where there's a lot of tax evasion and then tax avoidance that people try to play around and then they don't pay tax. Well, now that should be a conversation we're also having. How can we strengthen this? The digital tax term, I've tried to solve it. The URA is yet to do an assessment to see how efficient it was, how it's worked, but also the tax policy, the tax policy making process. It should be in a way that encourages everyone to be embedded. For example, you don't have to bring in a tax which is not going to be popular. Yes, for example, I think in 2020, 2019, when the tax on mobile money came, there was outcry everywhere. When it was reduced to about 0.5, people kept quiet and they started paying it. So that shows you the kind of the tax policy making processes we have. It is, most times it is rushed. There's no much consultation. So these are the things we need to improve, because if we go to business saying, this is your business, it's small. As government, we want to improve the service. We want to improve our services to you, registration. What do you think we should do? We want to bring you on board to tap into the opportunities. Wealth. And also, let's fiscal discipline. When it comes to reducing our domestic debt, the entire public debt, let's have fiscal discipline. Let's spend where we have to spend. She was saying, when we are getting contracts, how do we negotiate for our contracts, for example? If we are negotiating for roads, can we get the best value for money? Yes.
Okay, so I'll bring it still on the topic of widening the tax base as opposed to deepening the tax base. Government is doing quite a number of things to bring the informal sector, like you said, into the formal, sector, to make them tax, compliant. I can say perhaps through the MIOGA. I've been following the MIOGA for I think 2 years now, and you can actually see an impact in the people's businesses. They have liquidity, they have cash, and these are the people that are going to still be taxed at the end of the day. We're looking at the parish development model coming through. We cannot, it might still be a little too early to judge that, but speaking to a number of economists, they say that we can best see the results of the parish development model if you, in the mid-long-term range, which is something we're going to have to give time to observe. But Madam Esther, what would you say about government bringing the informal sector into the formal sector as a way of widening the tax base?
I'd look at it in two angles. Whereby, in one or another, on one hand, they're trying to bring in the informal sector. On the other hand, they are kicking them out. Case in point where you see government is borrowing from commercial banks money. It is the private sector at the same time they are going to these commercial banks to borrow money. When you look at it, definitely government will easily access a loan compared to a private person to access a loan, because now you're competing for the same resources. And in most cases, the private sector will be kicked out, because any lender would easily give a commercial loan to a government. They are guaranteed of being paid, and the terms become convenient for the government. So in that case, I look at it, they are kicking out the private sector in the economy. On the hand of bringing them on board, all in the interest of widening the tax base, that one, I'm not very sure about it, but when I look at the other incentives that government has put in place, the issue of rationalization of government entities, the merging of government entities is one of the initiatives government is putting in place so that our taxes can increase, and at the same time we are able to service our debts and reduce on domestic areas. Whereby now in this financial year, they are looking at merging some of these institutions. For example, you talk about NERA, then you have Uganda Services Bureau merged in one entity. This will reduce on expenditures like utilities, the fleet, rent. So you're saving on that. You're saving on rent, you're saving on fleet as well as utilities, so that this money can go back into servicing the debt, whether domestic areas or different debts that we have that can be used. But as before you celebrate that, we have the other angle where we go ahead to create more districts. Create more districts, municipalities, now cities need more allocation. And yet Ministry of Finance will tell you for a new district to take off, they need about 59 billion. In terms of having a hospital, having basic services, hospital, police headquarters. So in the end, as you think you're saving one side here, it's going to go into the new created districts or cities. And when it comes to pushing, what are we pushing for? If we are saving money or widening our tax revenue. And the other thing I would look at local level, like he earlier mentioned, Ministry of Finance has come up with a revenue collection strategy. They need to align with local government so that local government is in hand with the Ministry of Finance to make sure this strategy is applied, whereby it is automated at local level so that you can reduce on human touch when it comes to collecting of taxes, which Ministry of Finance is pushing for. But at the moment, if some of the local governments are on board, others are not yet there.
Speaking to an economist, the economist Professor Nwagaba, he told me that it's possible that yes, we are bringing local government on board, but it seems the plan to give local government the mandate to contribute hasn't yet gained momentum. Yes, it needs streamlining, but it hasn't yet gained momentum to the point whereby it can actually sustainably contribute, because there are still also gaps in there. Yeah. So what magic do you think we are going to have to do to put local government to that task on contributing? Perhaps let Steve answer this one.
Okay. I'll come to that question. You had still talked about issues to do with it. This will also answer your question about. I think PDM is a good strategy. Yeah. And coming from an economic point of view, is that money will go down. Money is going down to the hands of the people. You talk about liquidity. So we need to strengthen the issues of implementation and monitoring this.
I think so.
Yeah, so because this 1 trillion, by the way, Ministry of Finance this financial year, which is ending, released 1 trillion for PDM, and it was on time. And that's one thing we need to commend Ministry of Finance for, releasing the quarterly releases on time. Yes, they had committed to release it by the 10th day of the first month of the quarter, which they have done that. That is something good. So coming to your point on seeing how to bring the local government on board,
yes.
There has been a talk. There has been a talk about the local government revenue mobilization strategy. How can the local government mobilize strategy and mobilize revenue for the overall good of the local government and even the country, and to widen our issues of domestic revenue mobilization? So I think we need to have kind of a streamlined process in terms of the local revenue mobilization in the downstream, but also I like the idea that the money collected from the local government is sent to
the central government.
However, we need to systematically increase the amount of money that remains for local government, to encourage them to make. They need to have some. At least let the percentage that remains with the local government, let it be widened systematically so that they have money to spend at source.
Do you think the structures at local government are robust enough to utilize these funds effectively?
Well, the structures are there.
Are they ready? Are they?
Well, now as Ministry of Finance and Government, we need to look into strengthening this system. One way is doing the e-system, the e-procurement, let's strengthen the system. The reason why I am emphasizing on increasing the amount of money that remains with the local government is that they can spend in time. Government projects can run quickly. For example, if they have to maintain some roads and then they still have to send requests to finance, and then they wait for another 6 months to work on a feeder road that is maybe linking the villages to the market. So if they have that money, then there's that autonomy that they can easily. The whole point of in public finance management, resource mobilization, is to improve the life of the local person. So if there's a problem in the road and it can easily be settled without a lot of bureaucracy, I think that should be a way for us to look at.
Okay, so I'm reading here that according to the Ministry of Finance, the government will prioritize peace and security, road maintenance, construction of power substations and transmission lines. Priority will also be given to acquisition of the right-of-way starting for the construction of the standard gauge railway, which is something we're going to be taking on this coming financial year. The construction of small-scale power irrigation equipment, building infrastructure, and connecting the electricity that we are tapping now. So when I look at all these, I see infrastructural development. And infrastructural development is one way that is trying to motivate productivity within the economy, okay? I would love to ask Madam Esther Mufumba, do you think these priorities are on point, or you think otherwise?
I think they are on point, because if we keep talking about like the thing for this budget, which talks about monetization, monetized economy, an ordinary citizen needs to feel the money in their pockets, because you can have all these allocations, but how does it trickle down to someone who's down there in the village? If we are looking at infrastructure, road networks, once there are allocations for roads and the issue of maintenance, I'm not sure about maintenance, how much was allocated, but when it comes to roads construction, at least you're sure there'll be accessibility to the market. And then also when it comes to electricity, when it comes to harvesting, so that you can boost productivity and these people can be able to access the market. For example, maybe the market may not be in my nearby area, but with the standard gauge railway, someone can easily connect to Mombasa to deliver their products. Maybe the clients are in Mombasa. So it is a very good initiative, and it takes care of even the vulnerable groups. When you look at people with disability, looking at the women, the children, and people living in disadvantaged areas, for example, in war-torn areas, the refugees. So it brings everyone on board when you look at the different sectors where government is saying, yeah, we are going to invest in this. Agro-industrialization, employ the youth in that, so that this, well, people are saying there's no job, there are no jobs, at least it takes care of the different groups around. So we are on course.
Okay, yeah. I think then we agree. Then what about the capitalization of Uganda Development Bank and Uganda Development Corporation? How do you see these institutions contributing to, productivity? Because one of the challenges, of course, a lot of people that have been spooning for this money at Uganda Development Bank is that the challenge they've been facing is that they are not viable. Some of them don't have the right paperwork, some of them don't have the returns in check, and this has limited them, yeah? And one might say that yes, the environment has restricted them. Some people will prefer to withhold their data and not really come out. But of course, URA has also come out and given people the will to declare at will, yeah? Which is a very good move, like you said. When you're instituting tax policies, they should be favorable. So what role do you think this kind of capitalization can do for small-scale industries, small and large industries? Because industrialization is a key factor in boosting an economy. Yeah. I like the fact that we have set up industrial parks all over, but getting them to work is also another thing. Yeah. So what would you say about that, Stephen?
Giving money to ADB is a good thing.
UDB, yes.
UDB, yes. So my question is, what is the procedure for people to access this money? This money is targeting small and medium-sized businesses, but will they get the money? That is what we should be asking ourselves.
What is the process people getting the money?
Yes. Now, is the process streamlined? Yes, it might be streamlined, but it might again be too strict for these businesses. You see, these businesses are just from COVID. They have struggled. They don't have money, liquidity for raw materials. So, can we make this money, since they have said this money is gazetted for small and medium-sized businesses? Do we know these businesses? Yes, some of them we know, the ones which are registered. Do we know the ones struggling? Maybe URA can give us that question by knowing that this business for the past 5 years has been filing this amount, but for some reason the amount has dropped, yet you expect the business to grow. Can URA or can ADB, when they're doing their evaluations, follow up these businesses and say, we have this money that can help you stabilize. We have this money that can help you increase or profitalize or buy raw materials. So that's the kind of initiative we need. That's the kind of initiative that...
So basically you're talking about streamlining data.
Yes, streamlining data.
Streamlining data in the back end to make efficient decision making. And also in efficient, effective or favorable policies. And
So what I'm trying to say is that if URA realizes that my business, for example, has been contributing maybe 500 million in tax returns, but for the last 2 years I have been maybe registering less than 100 million, it's upon them to come and ask, what's wrong? How can we help? They are this initiative. Even URA themselves can recommend UDB that there's this business for Stephen that has been struggling. I might not have, because of the bureaucracy, the hard ways of getting this money, I might not want to apply for it. But if I have a recommendation from a government regulator saying that we recommend this person to be given money, this money is available, can you advance this money? Then if that happens, I think UDB can honor the request from URA to help this identified. It should be in a more objective way. I don't say every small and medium business identified should be given money. Of course, they have to be having their books in order, but also how they have their books in order. It's upon the regulator to keep checking these people. Do they have the right? Have they filed the returns? And in a more kind of friendly way. Gone are the days where you have to harass business. Let's speak the common term and say, how do we help you to stabilize? How do we help you to do well?
Because
so
it's
that
a
you meet your
public-private partnership in a way to raise. Okay.
But yes, so that's the kind of conversation we should be having. Your question, you had a question about how will these allocations of the development in the development sector work? I like the allocation in agriculture, especially the small medium size irrigation schemes. Agriculture is the biggest employer. We need to acknowledge that. But how much is it going to agriculture? How much are we putting in agriculture? How much are we trying to modernize agriculture? Can we increase the standard of our products? We don't have to produce maize and then they are rejected in Kenya, in Nairobi, because it's not fit for human consumption. So that's, I still believe PDM is going to the local person who is involved in agriculture. That's a lot of money going there, which is something good. I encourage people to apply for this money and utilize it the right way. But let's increase more systematic allocations towards agriculture because it's our biggest employer, and then modernize it.
Okay. What do you think, Esther, about capitalizing, UDB and these corporations?
It's a good thing.
Okay. Now I'm talking to Esther now.
Oh, okay.
I think my view is not very different from Stephen's. The issue is the criteria, because when you look at the different segments that are catered for, UDB, you find that it is easily accessed by people who already have their portfolios, and people from the vulnerable communities can't easily access those loans. So still, like I said, those ones can easily access the loans, the money in wealth creation through the PDM, Myoga. There you will access the money to slowly grow, because when it comes to UDB, and ordinary citizens, they will have to ask you for security, which a rural man might not present, form of collateral, should not have it. So you find still it is the big businessmen who are able to access money from UDB compared to the majority of the population, and it's still a small segment that can access money. I think that's my take. So let's make use of the other initiatives that government has put in place. PDM, let's encourage people to get involved in productivity activities. Is it farming? Is it poultry? Simple activities, but you grow because it's one step to another.
I would like to challenge you as a light note away. Are any of you engaged in any kind of production for this country? Could it be, what are you engaged in, Mr. Stephen?
I have a farm in Waya.
Okay.
I do soybeans and maize.
What's your scale?
And I have 100 acres.
Okay.
But the biggest problem is issues of the farming itself. There's land, but then people don't know how to do the right farming method. It's very unfortunate that the people who are supposed to be doing farming are not doing farming. What do I mean? People who are gone through school, we've learned how agriculture works. You need to plan in time, you need to plant the right seeds, you need to know the soil fertility, the moisture content, you need to utilize the weather forecast. But people don't utilize that. For example, and in the vicinity where I work, where the farm is, you see that people don't plant in time, and that is partly because I think there are not much extension workers. There are not enough. Yes, so, and I would encourage government to increase on the extension workers for agriculture. But you see people not planting the right seeds.
So this, you're talking about your farm.
Yeah, but then that trickles
how are you running your farm based on these parameters? Are you?
Well, I am trying to do the right thing because at least I know what to do. Yes, I'm trying to prepare the garden in time. It's during the dry season, you clear the garden. And then I'm also buying the right seeds. I'm happy Narrow produce those good seeds, for example.
You're using Narrow seeds?
I'm using Narrow seeds.
Wow.
Which is good.
Which is very good.
The yield, the yield was very good. But if you compare the yield I got from my farm to the neighbors and to the small scale farmers around, it is very low. So can we tell these people that you can get these good quality seeds and then you get something out of it? Can we tell them that it is okay, it's good to plan on time?
And of course it's not your job.
It is not my job, yes. It is not my job. But then these extension workers that we're advocating for to be increased, let them be deployed there and advise the farmers.
Okay.
But also government should take more initiative on commercial scale agriculture.
Yes.
Yes.
Which markets are you tapping in? Are you tapping into both the regional and local market, or just
the local markets?
Local market.
Yes.
All right. Okay. What about you, Madam Esther? How are you operating? What kind of productivity are you contributing to for our country?
For me, I'm more in the health sector, where you're looking at home care services.
Home care services.
Yeah, because